This is not just a story. This is the full history of Islam. One man, one cave, one night. How did he unite Arabia, a land living in its darkest age, in just 23 years? How did the Islamic State surpass even the great Roman Empire in only 100 years? The Battle of Uhud could not stop the Muslims, nor could the Roman army of 100,000 at Mu'tah. Our story begins with the year of the elephant at Kaaba and reaches all the way to the conquest of Istanbul. And yes, from an orphan child to a civilization that ruled 3 continents. From the time of our prophet to the 4 caliphs, to the Umayyads and the Abbasids, and then to the Ottomans. This is not just the history of a religion, this is the fastest transformation in human history. The greatest conquests, the brightest golden age, 900 years of Islam in just 60 minutes.
There is no turning back today. Hold your ground! Retreat! Allahu Akbar!
You are watching Religious Story TV. We are creating the first AI-based Islamic history series on YouTube. To support us, you can subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment. This helps us reach more people and create more videos. If you are ready, let's begin. The last quarter of the 6th century. We are in the middle of a dark age. The world is tired from the bloody wars of 2 great empires, the Sasanian and the Byzantine. The empires were still standing, but they had lost their soul. Justice belonged to the strong. Humans were enemies of other humans. Slavery was normal. Oppression was ordinary. Mercy was rare. At this very moment, not at the center of the world, but at its edge, in a land surrounded by deserts, a scene was being prepared that would change the direction of history. Our story begins in Mecca. This land did not take much space on maps, but it stood at the heart of trade routes. Politically, it was unimportant. There was no great empire and no central authority. There were tribes, there were blood feuds, there were idols. Every tribe had a god, and every god had an interest. But in the heart of this dry land, there was a black structure, a sanctuary that no one could see as ordinary. The Kaaba, one of the oldest places of worship in human history, a legacy from Ibrahim. Over the centuries, it had lost its direction, but it never lost its holiness. However, at that time, the Kaaba was not standing for Tawhid. It stood in the shadow of 360 idols, like a silent pile of stone. Society was inside a deep darkness known as Jahiliyyah. Justice was worse here than in most parts of the world. The weak, the orphan, and the woman had no value. Baby girls were buried alive. A father would take his newborn daughter, go deep into the desert, dig a hole, and bury that innocent child under the sand. Why? So there would be no shame. So she would not be a burden. One of the most brutal traditions in history was lived as if it were normal. Mecca had fallen into darkness, but it was also standing on the edge of a great explosion. The first sign of tension that would change the fate of Mecca appeared. The year was around 570. In Yemen, the Abyssinian governor Abraha turned his eyes toward Mecca. He had built a magnificent church in Sana'a, but it did not attract the Arabs or the people of the region. This hurt Abraha's pride. He thought, if I destroy the Kaaba, the Arabs will be forced to come to my church. And so one of the strangest armies in history set out. 60,000 soldiers, hundreds of horses, dozens of camels, and most importantly, 9 giant elephants. At their head was a massive war-trained elephant named Mahmud. This was not just a military threat, it was psychological warfare. The message was clear. What you call sacred will be crushed under the feet of my army. As the army moved toward Mecca, It crushed everything in its path. Small tribes scattered, cities surrendered, even Taif did not resist. No one could stand against elephants. The people of Mecca heard the news, but they were helpless. They could not prepare for war. They had no power and no army. The owner of the Kaaba was not human. They simply withdrew. As the leader of the city, Abdul Muttalib moved the people to the mountains and spoke these historic and tense words: "I am the owner of the camels. The Kaaba has an owner who will protect it." And then it happened. When the armies reached the gate of the Kaaba, Abraham gave the order to his army, "Move forward." But Mahmud, the giant elephant, did not take a single step. They whipped him, they hit him, they shouted. The elephant did not move. When they turned him toward the south, east, or west, he began to run. But every time they turned him toward the Kaaba, he fell to the ground. The other elephants did the same. 9 elephants, as if stopped by an invisible force. And then the sky began to darken. At first it looked like a small cloud. Then it grew and spread. And the people of Mecca realized something. These were not clouds. These were birds. Thousands, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of birds. Ababel birds, small, dark, flying in groups. They carried stones in their beaks and feet. But these were not ordinary stones. They were special stones, small, hard, like baked clay. And then it began like rain. Stones started to fall on the army of Abraham. The soldiers screamed and ran in terror. The elephants went wild. The massive army fell into panic. Even Abraham tried to escape, but one of the stones struck him as well. Abraham and his army were destroyed there, completely scattered. This event shouted to the whole world that Mecca and the Kaaba were not just stone structures, but were under divine protection. And then, in the year right after this miracle, while the date was 20 April, 571, the orphan who would change the destiny of humanity was born. His name was Muhammad, peace be upon him. His father Abdullah had passed away before he was born. His mother Amina raised him as an orphan until he reached the age of 6. Then she also passed away. The young child was now without both father and mother. First, his grandfather Abdul Muttalib took care of him. After that, his uncle Abu Talib became his guardian. In the harsh conditions of Mecca, being an orphan was not easy. But this child was different from the very beginning. He belonged to a noble lineage, but he was not rich. He was protected, but not spoiled. He met the hard face of life at an early age. Muhammad did not spend his childhood in palaces. He worked as a shepherd. He joined trade journeys. He observed people. He saw the true face of Mecca. Lies, cheating, interest, slavery, how women were humiliated, how the strong were always seen as right. But he did not become part of this system. Even at a young age, the people of Mecca gave him a title, Al-Amin, the trustworthy one. This title suited him perfectly. He never lied. He was merciful to everyone. He loved to help people. He was different from everyone else, like a single light in deep darkness. And Muhammad was disturbed by this system, but he did not rebel. He did not shout. He did not feel that he belonged to this world. He was only thinking about the purpose of his existence. What people of Mecca believed could not be true. But then, what was the truth? He often left Mecca and went to the Hira cave. This was not an escape. It was a search. He was looking for answers in silence. These questions slowly separated him from Mecca. As time passed, strange signs began to appear in his life. Dreams, feelings that came in silence, a heavy sense of responsibility growing in his heart. But there was still no voice, not yet. The next step would be a step with no return. A voice, a sentence, a command, and history would never be the same again. While working in trade in his 20s, Muhammad showed such strong honesty that it caught the attention of Khadija, one of the most respected women of Mecca. The home they built together would later become the first stronghold of a great mission. Yet, in Muhammad's heart, there was a deep unrest that never ended. The period of Wahi, the moment the voice rose. It was night. Mecca was silent. Even the desert wind was moving slowly. The city was sleeping under the shadow of idols, but history was about to wake up. In the Hira cave, there was a man alone. He had just reached the age of 40. He had again left the noise of Mecca and come to this cave on Jabal al-Nur. Days of deep reflection had passed, and finally that night an answer would come. It was a night in Ramadan in the year 610. The angel Jibril appeared in the cave. The air became heavy. Time seemed to stop. The angel said, "Read." Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was shocked. He was afraid. He trembled. He replied, "I cannot read." But the voice did not withdraw. The same command was repeated, stronger, heavier. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave the same answer again. And the third time the angel Jibril said, "Read in the name of your Lord who created." This was not an invitation. This was a duty. And this duty would change not only his life, but the history of humanity. When he left the cave, he was no longer the same person. His heart was heavy. There was an unseen but crushing burden on his shoulders. He was now chosen. He ran home. His wife Khadijah met him. He said, "Cover me." He was shaking. This moment was critical because prophethood did not begin with heroic strength, but with very human fear. Soon after, a new command came: "Rise and warn." Khadijah listened to him and to what he experienced. She did not hesitate. She comforted him. She immediately believed in what he said. This was very important, because this call was first accepted by the closest one. The first 3 years of Islam in Mecca passed as a secret call. The command for open preaching had not yet been given by Allah. A small group of people gathered in the house of Arqam. Among them were slaves, young people from powerful families, orphans, the oppressed pushed aside by the system, and also wealthy traders. The early years required great caution because Mecca was very dangerous for them. The call was shared only with trusted people, and it spread slowly. The first Muslims did not put their status at risk. They put their lives at risk. But no matter how careful they were, this silent cry soon reached the ears of the Mecca elite, especially the protectors of the system such as Abu Jahl and Abu Lahab. And when the call became public, Mecca was shaken because this message rejected idols, rejected tribal superiority, rejected the division between rich and poor, and most dangerous of all, it said, "You are all equal." This was a declaration of war against the system of Mecca. First they mocked, then they isolated. Then torture began. The year was 613, the third year of prophethood. With the divine command, "Warn your closest relatives first," Prophet Muhammad went up to Mount Safa and addressed all the people of Mecca. This was the moment when the entire population of Mecca officially and openly learned about Islam. With this open call, torture, threats, and pressure began to target all Muslims across Mecca. Slaves were whipped, the poor were crushed, Muslims were starved, some were killed. The martyrdom of the Yasir family on the burning sands, and Bilal al-Habashi crying out, "Ahad, Ahad," 1-1. While a massive stone was placed on his chest, pushed the tension to its peak. But this oppression did not extinguish faith. On the contrary, it proved that this message was not false, because despite torture, they did not abandon their belief. After this period lasted for 3 years, the mushrik of Mecca increased the violence even more. They imposed a 3-year embargo on Muslims and those who supported them. This was a social and economic boycott. For Muslims, Mecca had become an open-air prison. During this time, Muslims faced extreme hunger and deep poverty. They survived by eating tree bark. Then came the year 619, known as the Year of Sorrow. Khadija and the Prophet's protector, his uncle Abu Talib, passed away one after another. The Prophet seemed completely alone. No one in Mecca was listening to him anymore. He thought the Muslims might need to seek refuge in another city. He considered Taif. He set out with his adopted son, Zayd. Taif was a beautiful city about 100 kilometers southeast of Mecca, with vineyards and gardens. He went to the leaders of Taif. He explained Islam. He asked for support. They rejected him. Not only did they reject him, they expelled him from the city. Worse than that, they encouraged street children and reckless youths to attack him. They stoned the Prophet ﷺ. Zayd tried to protect him, using his own body as a shield, but the stones kept coming. The Prophet's feet were bleeding. His head was injured. Weak and losing blood, he left Taif. While shedding tears, he rested in a garden and tended to his wounds. At that moment, Jibril came and said, "O Muhammad, if you wish, we can crush this city between two mountains." The Prophet replied, "No. Perhaps from their descendants there will be people who believe in Allah." Mercy. Prophethood was not revenge. It was mercy, not anger, but compassion. After tending his wounds on the road, he returned to Mecca. And then, one night, that great journey took place, because the darkest moment is the closest to dawn. That night, Allah took his messenger on a journey beyond the heavens. When he returned, his spirit was much stronger. Meanwhile, the mushrik of Mecca realized that the embargo had not reduced the number of Muslims. Even some mushrik with conscience began to question the boycott. The cries of hungry Muslim children echoing through the streets of Mecca touched their hearts. These people spoke with other influential figures. Eventually, among the crowd gathered near the Kaaba, those who argued that the boycott must end became many. Even many non-Muslim people of Mecca no longer wanted to watch their own relatives die from hunger. And finally, the boycott was lifted. Even after the boycott ended, pressure against Muslims continued in Mecca. Mecca had become an unlivable place for Muslims. But now, there was a new hope: Medina. During the pilgrimage seasons, the Prophet spoke about Islam to tribes coming from outside. A group from the city of Yathrib, later Medina, came. They listened. They believed. Then they returned. The next year, they came in greater numbers. At Aqaba, secretly at night, they met the Prophet. They gave their pledge. They said, "We will protect you as we protect our own families." The Prophet understood. Medina was ready. The time for Hijrah had come. Muslims began to migrate quietly. The year was 622. First, the family of Abu Bakr, then others. In small groups, without drawing attention, the mushriks of Mecca noticed. They gathered in anger. "If Muhammad leaves," they said, "Islam will spread much more strongly and will become impossible to control." Abu Jahl said, "We must kill him." But how? If one tribe kills him, Banu Hashim will take revenge. A clever plan was made. One young man from each tribe. All would strike together. In this way, the blood would be shared by all tribes, and no blood revenge could be taken. But a great miracle would happen. As he passed among them, none of them would see him. The journey to Medina would be risky and dangerous, because the mushriks of Mecca were chasing them. Yet another miracle would take place, and again, Allah would protect his prophet. Medina was not just a migration, it was a turning point. In Medina, there was excitement. Muslims went out to the roads every day asking, "Is Rasulullah coming?" And one day, he appeared, riding his camel Qaswa, with his white turban shining under the sun. Children filled the streets and sang, "Tala al-Badru alayna." The full moon has risen over us. Everyone wanted to host the Prophet in their home, but the Prophet did not want to hurt anyone. He said, "Leave the camel, let her go. Where she kneels, we will buy that land and build." The camel knelt. That place is where Masjid an-Nabawi stands today. It was a date-drying area owned by two orphan boys. The land was bought, and the building of both a mosque and a home began. The Prophet himself carried stones. They built it together. Here, the foundation of the first Islamic mosque and the first Islamic state center was laid. With the Hijra, the calendar began. A state was established. Belief met society. From this moment on, Islam was no longer only a call. It became a system. The Prophet had the Medina Charter written, known as one of the first written constitutions in history. Muslims, Jews, and mushriks were all included. It was a document that defined the rights and responsibilities of everyone. We will live together. We will respect each other's religions. If an external attack comes, we will defend together. We will not turn away from justice. The second major step was the brotherhood between the Muhajirun, those who came from Mecca, and the Ansar, the Muslims of Medina. This was real brotherhood. The Ansar shared their homes, their wealth, and their gardens. They gave the Muhajirun homes, work, and support. In this way, integration into society happened very quickly, an integration that even the most developed Western societies struggle to achieve today was accomplished in a very short time. People who, not long before, had buried their daughters alive, now found ways to live together with people of very different beliefs and backgrounds. They showed humanity how it could be done. While there was peace in Medina, Mecca did not remain still. The year was 624. The army of Mecca set out to crush this new force while it was still growing. Under the command of Abu Jahl, they were about 1,000 men with 700 camels and 100 horses, fully equipped, armor, swords, spears. They met near the wells of Badr. The numbers were frightening, 313 against 1,000. One Muslim would face 3 enemies, but there was a difference. One army was filled with faith. The Prophet made supplication, "O Allah, send the help you promised. If this group is destroyed today, there will be no one left on earth who worships you." That night, rain fell. The Muslim side became slightly wet, the dust settled, and the ground became firm. The side of the mushriks turned into mud. In the morning, the battle began. Some of the mushriks later said they saw angels that day, warriors on white horses with green turbans. Fear took hold of them, and the battle ended with a clear victory for the Muslims. Abu Jahl, the greatest enemy of Islam, was lying on the ground. The first major victory, but it was only the beginning. The year 625 came. The people of Mecca gathered a larger army for revenge, 3,000 soldiers. The Prophet wanted to defend Medina, but the younger companions wanted an open battle outside the city. The Prophet accepted. He went to Mount Uhud with 1,000 Muslims. On the way, the hypocrite Abdullah ibn Ubay turned back with 300 men. Only 700 Muslims remained, facing 3,000 mushriks. The Prophet made a strategic plan. He placed 50 archers at a narrow pass on the mountain and said, "Do not leave this position. Whether we win or lose, do not leave." The battle began. The Muslims gained the upper hand. The mushriks began to flee. Then, the feared mistake happened. The archers thought, "We are winning," and they left their position. The mushrik commander Khalid ibn Walid, not yet Muslim at that time, saw the opportunity. He moved around from behind and attacked the Muslims from the rear. Panic began. The Muslims were confused. They were caught between two sides. The Prophet became a target. Arrows fell. One struck his face. His tooth was broken. His face began to bleed. A stone hit his head. His helmet pressed into his head. He fell. "The Muhammad is dead!" the mushriks shouted. The companions scattered in panic. Some ran away. Some sat down and cried. Hamza, the uncle of the Prophet, and many Muslims were martyred. The battle ended. 70 Muslims were martyred. The Prophet himself was wounded. But the people of Mecca did not dare to enter the city. They withdrew. When the Prophet saw the body of Hamza, He cried and said, "I will never see an uncle like you again." Uhud became a lesson: obedience, discipline, strategy, patience. The Muslims learned. The year 627 came. This time, the people of Mecca came with allies. The Ghatafan tribe, Banu Sulaim, and others joined them. A massive army of 10,000 men. In Medina, there were only 3,000 Muslims. How would they defend the city? Salman al-Farisi, a man from Persia, made a suggestion. "Let us dig a trench, a deep channel around the city. This is how the Persians defend themselves." The Prophet accepted. With everyone working together, including the Prophet himself, the trench was completed. The mushriks arrived. They were shocked. The siege began, but they could not cross. They shot arrows, but the trench could not be passed. One night a violent storm came. The tents of the mushriks were blown away. Their fires were extinguished. Abu Sufyan said, "O Quraysh, this place is no longer good for us. Our animals are dying. Qurayza has abandoned us, and the storm is harming us. We are leaving." The army scattered. Islam had won with intelligence, a strategic victory. The year was 628. The Prophet saw a dream and gathered the Muslims to perform Umrah. He set out with 1,400 people. They were unarmed, only for Umrah. Swords stayed in their sheaths. There was no intention of war, because in that time, Arabs considered fighting during the sacred months forbidden. The people of Mecca stopped the Muslims at a place called Hudaybiyah, about 20 kilometers from Mecca. After negotiations, the terms of an agreement were written. The terms were, Umrah would not be performed this year. It would be performed the next year. There would be no war for 10 years. Any Muslim who escaped from Mecca to Medina would be returned. But anyone who escaped from Medina to Mecca would not be returned. Tribes could choose either side freely. The Muslims were angry. "This is not an agreement. This is surrender," they said. But the Prophet signed it and said, "Allah will open a way." And he did. That agreement became one of the greatest victories of Islam. The Quran called it a clear victory. Why? Because within 2 years, even before the 10 years ended, Islam spread through peace. People began to speak freely. Muslims who were returned to Mecca did not disappear. They lived in the countryside around Mecca and became a pressure point, spreading Islam and weakening Quraysh control. The terms looked bad on the surface, but the results were great success. Once again, Allah and His Messenger won, even though some Muslims had sincere doubts at the time. By the year 630, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ stood at the gates of the city he had once left in secret, now with an army of 10,000 people. But this was not a march of revenge. The conquest of Mecca was achieved without bloodshed. It was an epic of forgiveness. As the idols in the Kaaba were destroyed one by one, the cry, "Truth has come," echoed through the sky. At this stage, Islam was still limited in geography, but its foundations were firmly laid. The Arabian Peninsula, Mecca and Medina became fully Muslim. Arab tribes such as Ayawaz, Khazraj, Ghatafan, Asad, and Tamim gave their pledge. In 628, the governor of Yemen, Badhan, became Muslim. Southern Arabia opened to Islam. In 629, Bahrain became Muslim. Islam spread in eastern Arabia. In Oman, the Julanda brothers, the rulers of Oman, accepted Islam. In Ethiopia, Muslims had been present since 615. The Najashi, the king, became Muslim, but the people remained Christian for a time and later accepted Islam. Black African Muslims also began to increase. Islam started spreading from mouth to mouth. In 629, the Battle of Mu'tah took place. For the first time, Muslims faced the Byzantine army. 3,000 Muslims against 200,000 Byzantine and Arab Christian allies. Khalid ibn Walid, now Muslim, saved the army with brilliant strategy and forced Byzantium to retreat. After Hudaybiyah, the Prophet made a historic decision. He sent letters to world leaders, inviting them to Islam. He sent letters to the Byzantine Emperor Heraclius, the Persian ruler Khosrow, and the ruler of Egypt, Muqawqis. These letters were not only invitations, they were declarations. A new power is rising. Its name is Islam. Its center is Medina. Byzantium was a 1,000-year-old empire. Persia had been a world superpower for centuries. Egypt was the cradle of ancient civilization. And now, from a humble desert city called Medina, a man from an unlettered society was saying to them, "Come to Islam." No one took it seriously, but 10 years later, Byzantium would lose Syria. 20 years later, Persia would disappear. 30 years later, Egypt would become Muslim land. In 632, in Mecca, the Prophet performed the historic pilgrimage known as the Farewell Hajj, Wada Hajj, with more than 100,000 Muslims. In truth, this was the closing of an era. In the farewell sermon, Khutbatul Wada, centuries before modern human rights declarations, he proclaimed, "There is no superiority of an Arab over a non-Arab, nor of a white over a black. Your lives, your property, and your honor are sacred. Treat women well. They are a trust given to you. I leave you two things. If you hold firmly to them, you will never go astray. The Book of Allah, the Quran, and the Sunnah of His Messenger. Let those who are present convey this to those who are not. Perhaps the one who hears later will understand better than the one who heard directly." Then the Prophet asked, "Have I conveyed the message? Do you bear witness?" A strong voice rose, "Yes." The Prophet said, "O Allah, bear witness." That day, Islam was completed. Revelation came. "Today I have perfected your religion for you, completed my favor upon you, and chosen Islam as your religion." After the farewell Hajj, the Prophet returned to Medina. A few months later, he became ill. His fever rose, his head was in pain. He lived his final days. His last words were whispered, "Rafiqul Allah." It meant the highest companion. His hand slowly fell, his breath stopped. On a Monday morning in the year 632, in his modest room in Medina, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the mercy to all worlds, passed away. He left behind not only a cloak and a sword, but something far greater, an unshakable faith, a state structure, and a book that would change the lives of billions. His prophethood lasted only 23 years, but in those 23 years, a religion was completed, an ummah was born, a civilization was built, Arabia was united, the Quran was revealed, prayer, fasting, charity, and pilgrimage were made obligatory, justice, equality, and human rights were proclaimed. At the time of his death, there were more than 100,000 Muslims. All of Arabia had entered Islam. Borders had formed with Byzantium and Persia. The foundations were laid. By the end of 632, the land of Islam was still small, but the core was planted. The seed was in the soil. Now it was time to grow, time to expand, time for conquest. The period of the four caliphs was about to begin. But the main question was this: who would carry this trust, and how? With the death of the Prophet, confusion arose in Medina. The Ansar and the Muhajirun had not yet agreed on a name. Everyone was shocked by the Prophet's death. Meanwhile, tribes outside Mecca and Medina, who had only recently entered Islam, were armed. Civil war was possible. For this reason, the Muslims put forward Abu Bakr as a candidate, and the majority chose him as leader. Many Muslims pledged allegiance to him. The first major crisis was overcome. With a selection similar to a democratic process, the first caliph was chosen. After the Prophet, Abu Bakr delivered the first constitutional speech in Islamic history. He said that the leader is not above the people. He must be accountable. He can be criticized. He can be removed. The West would celebrate this idea 1,000 years later as the Magna Carta. Muslims were living it in 632, but now there were major problems to solve. After the Prophet's death, Arabia began to fall into chaos. Tribes rebelled one after another. If Muhammad has died, then nothing binds us anymore. Some refused to give charity, some returned to their old idols, some invented new prophets. Musaylima al-Kadhdhab in Yamama was the most dangerous. He gathered an army of 40,000. Tulayha ibn Khuwaylid in Najd raised tribes in rebellion. Aswad al-Ansi in Yemen killed the governor. Saja, a woman, claimed prophethood and allied with Musaylima. 70% of Arabia was in rebellion. Only Mecca, Medina and Taif remained loyal. Some of the companions were worried and said, "Abu Bakr, wait. Make peace with them. Let us accept their prayer and not take charity. That should be enough. Otherwise, a great civil war would begin." Abu Bakr refused angrily, because the Prophet would never accept this either. Abu Bakr was his most loyal friend and follower. He sent 11 armies, each to a different region. Khalid ibn Walid, known as the Sword of Allah, was sent against the greatest threat, Musaylima. By the end of 632, Khalid ibn Walid reached Yamama with 13,000 Muslims. Musaylima's army was 40,000 strong. They were experienced in war and well-armed. In the first attack, the Muslims were pushed back. In the second attack, again they were pushed back. The situation was very serious. That day, 700 Muslims were martyred. Among them were 360 Quran memorizers. The battle ended with a Muslim victory, but with heavy losses. Because many Quran memorizers were being killed, there was a fear that the Quran could be lost. For this reason, the Quran was collected and written as a single book. About 20 years later, during the time of Uthman, it would be copied and distributed across the Islamic world. Abu Bakr's greatest success was not conquest. It was preventing Islam from falling apart, and he succeeded. Arabia was united again. As he approached his death, the fronts of Syria and Iraq were opened and armies were sent there. Victories were coming one after another. Especially in 633, the first major conquests began. When Abu Bakr passed away in 634, Umar ibn Khattab became the leader. Umar became one of the most striking leaders in Islamic history. During his time, Islam stopped being a regional power. It became a global force. But this expansion was not random. The world was already ready. The Byzantine and Sasanian empires had been fighting each other for years. The people were poor. Taxes were heavy. Religion was used as a tool of pressure. When the Islamic armies arrived, in many places they were met not with resistance, but with relief. The Battle of Firaz, 634, was especially important. The Persian and Byzantine armies joined together. For the first time, two superpowers stood side by side against the Muslims. 70,000 Persians plus 80,000 Byzantines plus Arab Christians equals 150,000 soldiers. The Muslims were 15,000. The ratio was 1 to 10. Khalid attacked at night. He struck with chaos. He burned the Persian camp and caused panic among the Byzantines. The battle lasted until morning. The Muslims won. Enemy losses, 100,000 dead. Muslim losses, 500 martyrs. The Persian front collapsed. At the same time, the Syrian front advanced with 4 armies, moving toward Homs, Damascus, Jordan, and Palestine. Byzantium was shocked. Where did these Arabs come from? Why are they so strong? They gathered a massive army, 200,000 soldiers, professional Byzantine legions, armored cavalry, Arab Christian allies. The Muslim commanders withdrew and united. They gathered near the Yarmouk River. At the Yarmouk River, 40,000 Muslims faced 200,000 Byzantines. Khalid was a tactical genius. He divided the army into groups and appointed a commander for each group. The battle lasted 6 days. On the 6th day, a storm broke out. Dust clouds covered the sky. The Byzantine army could not see. The Muslims attacked with the storm at their backs. The Byzantines were pushed toward the river. Panic began. Escape, chaos, drowning, the river filled with bodies. The Byzantine army was destroyed. Byzantine losses, 70,000 dead, 40,000 fleeing or captured. Muslim losses, 4,000 martyrs. Heraclius looked at Syria from Antioch and said with tears, "Farewell, Syria, you were a beautiful land, but now you belong to the enemy." The conquest of Jerusalem. When the great Caliph of Islam went to receive the surrender of the city, he was traveling with his servant and they were taking turns riding the camel. When they reached Jerusalem, it was the servant's turn to ride. So Umar entered the city on foot, holding the reins of the camel while his servant was riding. This scene shocked everyone. In this moment, the concept of the justice of Umar was written into history. 637, the Battle of Qadisiyah. The Persian commander Rostam gathered an army of 120,000 soldiers, war elephants, armored cavalry, storms of arrows. The Muslim commander Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas faced them with 30,000 men. Rostam was killed. The Persian army collapsed. Madain was conquered, the Persian capital. 400 years of Sasanian palaces, a golden throne, curtains with pearls, silk carpets. The spoils were enormous. They were brought to Umar in Medina. The Muslims had never seen such wealth. Umar cried and said, "This much wealth brings fitna. People will become attached to the world." He distributed the spoils equally among the soldiers. He left the palaces simple. 642, the Battle of Nahavand. They called it the Victory of Victories. The last great Persian army was completely destroyed. The Persian Empire was now finished. The conquest of Egypt, the gates of Africa open, 639. The commander Amr ibn Alas wrote to Umar, "Give permission for Egypt. It is the treasury of Byzantium and the land of grain." Umar hesitated. Too far, too risky, but he allowed it. "Go, but with a small army. I do not want great losses." Amr entered Egypt with 4,000 men, the land of pharaohs, the land of the Nile, the land of pyramids. 640, the Battle of Heliopolis. The Byzantine army was defeated. 641, the Siege of Alexandria, one of the greatest cities in the world. The siege lasted 14 months. In the end, the city surrendered. Egypt became Muslim land. Total conquered area, about 5.5 million square kilometers, the core of the Arab Islamic Empire. 644 November. During the dawn prayer, Umar was stabbed from behind by a Persian slave and was martyred. The Persian Empire had fallen. This was an act of revenge. The period of Uthman and the first cracks. During the rule of Uthman ibn Affan, conquests reached Cyprus and North Africa. The Islamic navy appeared on the seas. During this period, Islam continued to advance toward North Africa, the Caucasus, Khorasan. The conquest did not slow down. Tripoli was conquered in 643. Cyprus was conquered in 647. 651. The Persian Empire was completely destroyed. 655. Byzantium prepared a massive fleet of 500 ships to destroy the Islamic navy. The Muslims had only 200 ships. But through tactics and close combat, they captured enemy ships. Byzantine naval dominance was broken. The Mediterranean began to turn into an Islamic sea. Uthman's greatest service was this. He copied the Quran manuscripts that had been collected during the time of Abu Bakr and sent them across the world. This ensured unity and standardization of belief. However, Uthman's gentle character and his appointment of members of his own clan, Banu Umayyah, to positions of power caused unrest in society. Rebels from outside Medina surrounded the caliph's house. Uthman was martyred while reading the Quran. His blood fell onto its pages. That blood marked the beginning of the first great fracture in Islamic history, the coming of civil war. The period of Ali. During the time of Uthman, the Islamic Empire had reached about 12 million square kilometers. It had grown almost twice as large compared to the time of Umar. But every rise has a price. In 656, when Uthman was martyred, Medina and the Islamic State were thrown into chaos. In this process, Ali was chosen as leader. During Ali's rule, the Islamic world faced its first major internal crisis: political divisions, assassinations, civil wars. This period was not the time when Islam stopped, it was the time when it was tested. Expansion slowed down, energy turned inward. But Islam had reached a point where it could not be turned back. Ali, known as the Gate of Knowledge of Islam and the Fearless Lion, became Caliph while holding a vast empire and a great fire in his hands. The period of fitna had begun. On one side were Aisha, Talha, and Zubair, who demanded that the killers of Uthman be found and punished. This led to the Battle of the Camel. On the other side was Muawiyah, the governor of Syria, who opposed Ali. This led to the Battle of Siffin. The Battle of the Camel took place in 656 after the martyrdom of Uthman. Its goal was to quickly find and punish the killers. The battle was named after the camel that Aisha was riding, around which the fighting was centered. This battle happened near Basra, outside Medina, due to disagreement between Ali and Aisha, Talha, and Zubair. The result: Ali was victorious. Aisha was sent back to Medina with respect by Ali. This event entered history as the first major internal conflict in Islam. The year was 657. The Battle of the Camel was over, but the real crisis would be with Muawiyah. Muawiyah had been governor of Syria for 20 years. He was powerful. He controlled his army perfectly. The people of Damascus loved him. Muawiyah did not give allegiance to Ali and rebelled. In July 657, the Battle of Siffin took place. 90,000 supporters of Ali against 120,000 supporters of Muawiyah. First, attempts at negotiation. Then small clashes. Then full battle. It was terrible. Muslim brother was killing Muslim brother. The battle lasted for days. Ali's army began to gain the upper hand. Then the Syrian army raised copies of the Quran on their spears and said, "Let the book of Allah judge between us. Stop the fighting." Ali did not want this, but under heavy pressure he was forced to accept. 2 arbiters were chosen. The fighting stopped and the issue was handed to arbitration. But the talks did not bring a clear political solution. Instead, the situation became more complicated. Ali rejected the arbitration result, but he lost prestige. His authority was shaken. In 658, the Kharijites gathered in Iraq. They now openly became enemies of Ali. They raided villages and declared, "Supporters of Ali are unbelievers. Killing them is allowed." They murdered a companion, Abdullah ibn Khabbab, together with his pregnant wife. The Battle of Nahrawan, 658, followed. It was short but bloody. Most of the Kharijites were killed. Only a few escaped. But those who escaped were waiting for revenge. By 660, Ali was living in Kufa. He had made Kufa the capital instead of Medina. A cold war with Muawiyah continued. Ali was slowly losing control. Egypt had fallen to Muawiyah. Hijaz was undecided. Only Iraq remained under Ali. 3 Kharijites made a plan. On 21st Ramadan, 661, Ali was martyred. He was 63 years old. His caliphate lasted 4 years and 9 months. Years filled with pain, constant internal conflict, no peace, fitna and chaos. Yet Ali was remembered as one of the greatest heroes of Islam. His justice, his courage, his knowledge, his devotion. When Ali, who never moved even a step away from justice, was martyred in 661 by the poisoned sword of a Kharijite assassin, the period of the 4 caliphs, also known as the rightly guided caliphs, came to an end. This 29-year period is a mirror. It shows both the purest form of Islam and how human ambition can lead to great destruction. The state had grown, wealth had increased, but the simple and just world of the Prophet had begun to be crushed under the footsteps of power and rule. The Umayyad period. This period began in 661 with the Caliphate of Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. It marks the turning point in Islamic history when the Caliphate transformed into a dynasty. The capital was no longer Medina, the city of revelation, but Damascus, a magnificent city built on the legacy of Byzantium. For nearly a century, the Umayyads carried the banner of Islam from the Atlantic Ocean to the depths of Central Asia. However, this vast expansion came with a heavy moral and political cost. Karbala, the deepest wound, 680. The darkest and most painful page of Umayyad history is without doubt Karbala. By appointing his son Yazid as heir before his death, Muawiyah delivered the greatest blow to the Prophet's principle of shura, consultation. The Prophet's grandson Hussein refused to submit to injustice and tyranny. On the banks of the Euphrates, days of thirst and siege led to one of the greatest tragedies in Islamic history. The martyrdom of Hussein and his 72 companions opened a wound that would divide the Islamic world into Sunni and Shia political theological camps. This event permanently damaged the legitimacy of Umayyad rule, the peak of conquests, from Spain to Turkestan. Despite internal conflicts, the Umayyads became an unstoppable military force. The conquest of Al-Andalus, 711, Tariq ibn Ziyad crossed Jabal Tariq, Gibraltar, and burned his ships. The Visigoth kingdom collapsed, and the foundations of the Andalusian civilization were laid. Central Asia and India. Under Qutayba ibn Muslim and Muhammad ibn Qasim, Islam reached Transoxiana and the gates of India. The Islamic State reached its largest borders. The sun never set on Umayyad lands. Criticism and failure. The Mawali policy. The Umayyads' greatest failure was their departure from Islam's principle of universal brotherhood. Through the Mawali policy, non-Arab Muslims, Turks, Persians, Berbers, were treated as second-class citizens. This ethnic discrimination slowed the spread of Islam and created deep anger among conquered peoples. Arab nationalism replaced early Islamic justice, causing internal decay. The Umayyads repeatedly besieged Constantinople, but suffered heavy losses and failed. Military failures combined with internal unrest weakened the dynasty. Umar ibn Abdulaziz, the fifth caliph. Amid this dark picture, one bright figure emerged, Umar ibn Abdulaziz, often called the fifth caliph. In just 2.5 years, he abolished the Mawali policy, restored justice in taxation, banned palace luxury, ended oppression against the family of Ali. His rule briefly restored public trust. At the same time, great scholars like Hassan al-Basri emerged, and the foundations of hadith compilation were laid. The fall of the Umayyads, 750. Anger against Umayyad injustice turned into a major revolt in Khorasan, led by Abu Muslim. Under the slogan, "Justice for the family of the Prophet, Ahl al-Bayt," black-bannered armies defeated the Umayyads at the Battle of the Zab River. Only one prince, Abd al-Rahman, escaped to Spain, where he founded the Umayyad state of Al-Andalus, keeping the light of Islam alive in Europe. The Umayyad era was a story of great victories and a vast empire, but also of deviation from justice and brotherhood. Islam expanded physically, but suffered deep spiritual division. The Abbasid period. After the fall of the Umayyads, the center of Islam shifted from Damascus to Baghdad, on the banks of the Tigris. Unlike the Umayyads, the Abbasids declared Islam not as an Arab religion, but as a civilization for all humanity. This cosmopolitan vision launched Islam's greatest age of depth and expansion. Islam now spread not mainly by the sword, but through honest merchants, wise scholars, tolerant governance. The Battle of Talas, 751, was a major turning point. After fighting alongside the Abbasids against China, Turks began embracing Islam in large numbers. The Abbasids formed elite Turkish guard units and founded Samarra for this purpose. In Iran and Central Asia, Persian culture merged deeply with Islam. Great minds emerged: Ibn Sina, Avicenna, Farabi. Khwarizmi Islamic civilization embraced reason and science. In Africa and Southeast Asia, Muslim traders carried Islam to Sub-Saharan Africa, Mali, Songhai. Indonesia and Malaysia, Islam now reached deserts, steppes, forests, and oceans. Bait al-Hikmah, the House of Wisdom. Founded by Caliph Mansur and reaching its peak under Harun al-Rashid, Bait al-Hikmah became the world's greatest center of knowledge. Greek philosophy, Indian mathematics, Egyptian geometry, and Persian literature were translated into Arabic. Scientific revolutions followed. Khwarizmi introduced zero, and algebra. Ibn Sina's canon of medicine was taught in Europe for 600 years. Biruni calculated the Earth's circumference with astonishing accuracy. While Europe debated whether the Earth was flat, Muslim scholars mapped stars and wrote laws of optics. Relations with the West. Harun al-Rashid established diplomacy with Charlemagne, sending him a mechanical clock. Europeans thought it was magic. Paper, gunpowder, navigation tools, and rational thought flowed into Europe. Before the Crusades, this was the era when Islamic civilization led the world. Over time, Abbasid political power weakened as military governors gained control. The state fragmented. This weakness invited a terrible force from the east. In 1258, Hulagu Khan entered Baghdad. Libraries burned. Bait al-Hikmah was destroyed. Books were thrown into the Tigris. The river reportedly flowed black with ink. The Caliph Mustasim Billah was executed. The Abbasid Caliphate ended politically. Yet history had one last surprise. Many Mongols eventually accepted Islam, becoming its new protectors. Baghdad fell, but Islam lived on through. The Seljuks in Anatolia, the Mamluks in Egypt, the city was destroyed. The civilization survived. Ottoman rise, the transfer of the banner from Arabs to Turks. The foundation laid by Osman Ghazi in Sogut in 1299 quickly grew with the spirit of Gaza and jihad. The success of the Ottomans was not only based on military power, but also on their policy of winning hearts and tolerance in the lands they conquered. The Ottoman period carried Islam's geographical reach to unimaginable levels. The Balkans and Eastern Europe. With Ottoman advances, Islam entered Serbia, Bulgaria, Greece, Albania, Bosnia, and Hungary. Especially Bosniaks and Albanians accepted Islam in large numbers and became strong Muslim centers inside Europe. North Africa and the Maghreb. With the conquest of Algeria, Tunisia, and Libya, the Mediterranean turned into a Muslim sea. The Hijaz and the Arab world. With Yavuz Sultan Selim's Egypt campaign in 1517, the Holy Lands of Islam and the Caliphate officially passed to the Ottomans. Peoples who accepted Islam. Balkan societies, peoples of the Caucasus, Circassians, Abkhazians, local communities in East Africa, and the last non-Muslim groups of Anatolia entered Islam under Ottoman rule. The conquest of Istanbul, the fulfillment of a 1,000-year promise, 1453. On the morning of 29th of May, 1453, the great cannons that struck the walls destroyed not only a city, but an entire era. Mehmed the Conqueror, a 21-year-old genius, achieved the impossible by moving ships over land. The conquest of Istanbul was the fulfillment of a promise given by Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam centuries earlier. With this conquest, Islam was no longer seen as an Eastern religion. It now sat at the heart of the world, on the throne of Eastern Rome. Mehmed's vision went beyond Istanbul. His goal was Rome, the Red Apple, and to raise the Islamic banner over the Vatican. The Otranto campaign in Italy was the first step of this dream, but his life did not last long enough to complete it. Yavuz and the Caliphate, and Kanuni's world leadership Yavuz Sultan Selim, fit the work of a century into just 8 years of rule. He removed the Safavid threat at Chaldiran, then defeated the Mamluks and brought the sacred relics to Istanbul. From that moment on, the Ottoman Sultan was also the Caliph and the servant of Mecca and Medina. His son, Kanuni Sultan Suleiman, carried this power to its peak. When the Islamic banner reached the gates of Vienna, Europe trembled. If Vienna had fallen, no power could have stopped the Islamic armies. Frankfurt, Paris, even London would have been within reach. During Kanuni's time, Islam reached a golden age not only in war, but also in law and art. This is why he was called Kanuni. With Barbaros, Hayreddin Pasha at sea, and Mimar Sinan in architecture, the greatness of Islam was carved into history. The Islamization of the Balkans and the system of justice. The Ottoman arrival in the Balkans was a relief for local peasants. Tired of feudal oppression, Christian populations preferred the Ottoman system of justice, which offered low taxes and religious freedom. Through foundations, soup kitchens and schools, Islam became not just a ruling system in Europe, but a complete way of life. The Ottomans turned Islam into a global system. In the 16th century, a Muslim could travel from Morocco to Indonesia under the same law, with the same currency, and with the same respect. This was the greatest political integration Islam had ever seen.